All right, good. All right, I'm going to call this meeting of November 5th, Architecture Review, Historic Architecture Review Committee to order. We have a quorum, super quorum, I feel like today, with all 5 of us up here. Welcome, Mr. Williams, to our meeting. I appreciate you joining us, and along with all the rest of you. We have the quorum. I'm going to move. Do we have an action, request to withdraw or table anything?
Not today.
Okay. I need citizen comments. Doesn't appear to be. All right, we're going to jump right into new business. Proposed landscape improvements around Building B, former James River Christian Academy complex, 14353 Vins Church Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One little housekeeping note before we jump into this. At the request of the Board of Supervisors a few months ago, all of our meetings outside of the Planning Commission and board meetings are now recorded for posterity, so just keep that in mind. There's a camera right over there that's going to capture this meeting, and hopefully we'll get it up on the website in the foreseeable future for this meeting. So, the application in front of you all today has to do with property 3201093, which contains the former James River Christian Academy, as well as 7 townhouses in the rear. Building B, which is the subject of this application, is located on Vins Church Boulevard, approximately 50 feet to the northwest of St. Luke's Cemetery, and 1,000 feet from the entrance to historic St. Luke's Church. The former academic campus consists of 2 classroom buildings, a gymnasium, arranged by a central courtyard. Hanford's Classical, which y'all previously heard applications related to that use, previously occupied Building A, but closed in June of this year. Buildings A and B were both rehabilitated in 2022 and received HARC approvals for the architectural features in application HARC 621. The other application you have recently heard that's associated with this property is HARC 24-2, which received approval for a 6-foot tall double post detached identification sign for the school. This application in front of you today is specific for landscape improvements to the foundation zone around Building B and the buffer zone adjacent to the St. Luke's Cemetery parcel. The application is specifically requesting an alternative planning schedule that is not in compliance with the St. Luke's Historic District guidelines. The proposed landscape planning schedule supports improvements to the foundation and buffer landscape zones in addition to 1,600 square feet of brick paver and colored concrete with paver bands in the walkways. These improvements meet the design guidelines and have been approved administratively in accordance with Section 6-3006B of the zoning ordinance. The St. Luke's Historic District guidelines do stipulate that plants to utilize on planting plans be selected from the recommended plants lists for tree selections and shrub selections found on pages D10 and D11, which should be included in your packets. The guidelines also allow for any other native species not listed. The applicant is proposing several non-native species and is requesting approval of the planting schedule as presented. I will just note that, as I mentioned, there's a specific list of plants that are allowed. If they're not on that list, it says you can also choose native plants. Several of the ones that I have highlighted on this sheet here, you'll notice this is sheet L3 of the applicant's submitted landscaping schedule. And I just highlighted the ones in yellow that in my research were not on that list that the guidelines provide and were not native. Although I will say several of them are pretty common to Virginia. However, they weren't considered native in the great Google and AI research that I did. Section 6-3000 of the zoning ordinances, as you all know, establishes historic overlay districts in the county. There's 4 of them: Fort Boykin, Fort Huger, here at the courthouse, and the St. Luke's Historic District. Specific to the St. Luke's District, most of the time, applications in the other districts, all of them come to this committee for review. Specific to the St. Luke's Historic District, any development in there can be reviewed and approved administratively by the zoning administrator if the zoning administrator determines that the development is in compliance with those historic design guidelines. And if we determine that they're not, that's when we refer it to this committee for y'all's consideration and approval. Section 6-2008 provides guidelines for review of applications for new construction, alteration, renovation, and demolition within the designated historic districts. The criteria that y'all are to take into consideration is located at the bottom of page 2 of the staff report, and on the top of page 3. The purpose of the design standards are to fulfill the overall vision of traditional neighborhood development and architectural design in the St. Luke's Historic District, to ensure that all development and redevelopment be kept architecturally consistent with appearance and quality, and to protect and enhance the character of the St. Luke's Historic District. The design guidelines shall apply to all buildings, structures, improvements within the district, including fences, walls, signs, antennas, clotheslines, awnings, lawn and yard lighting, play equipment, and lawn ornaments. Nothing in the guidelines prevent an individual from conducting routine maintenance of their property. The applicant's proposed planting schedule includes some plantings outside the approved tree and shrub list and that are not considered native. The St. Luke's Historic Overlay District currently includes non-contributing properties such as this one that have direct visual impacts to historic St. Luke's Church and the cemetery. The applicant proposes to plant trees and shrubs that are not complementary to the existing landscaping the applicant proposes to plant trees and shrubs that are complementary to the existing landscaping around Building A. However, they are not consistent with the approved design guidelines, so therefore staff recommends denial of the application as presented. In your packet, as you're going through, you can see the proposed landscaping plan, the architectural, well, the layout of the landscaping plan that the landscape architect has submitted. Again, the layout and the points totals is not under consideration by this committee, specifically the list of plants and y'all's consideration of those. The pictures of the plants are provided by the applicant, kind of giving you an idea of some of the items that we have, or some of the plants that are identified in the list of non-conforming. And anything else good in here? There's some pictures of the building as it currently sits in the rear of your package, along with the tree selections and shrub selections that are pulled from the historic guidelines for St. Luke's, and a location map in the very end. At this point, the applicants are here this afternoon to represent their application. We have access to the internet, so if we need to, y'all mentioned not being plant experts. I'm not either. And if we need to dive into the internet to see what some of these plants look like, we have the ability to do that. So that's our staff report, and let them speak if you'd like.
Thank you. This is very thorough. Thank you, Kim. I have some questions. You guys you want to start? Anybody have questions?
You start.
I'll start. Okay. So, can you give us just a brief history on the plantings at Building A?
So it's my understanding that the plantings in Building A were approved as part of the development under Part 621. It was part of that application with the windows and the pane windows, exterior grids. And looking back over that application, the landscape was a part of that. I didn't see where that was approved separately from that application or discussed separately from that application.
And I don't recall any red flags at the time during that discussion, but it's been a while.
I don't recall any red flags either, specifically from the minutes of that meeting, but I wasn't there.
So on staff's review of that planting afterwards, I mean, have you guys, and I know you guys check on landscaping a year or two from now because we're having to do it elsewhere, but have there been any issues with those plant types that they put in on Building A so far?
With the final inspection that we're required to do 2 years after the initial planting, staff's job is primarily to go out there and make sure everything is still alive. Amy, do you recall if that planting inspection had any issues?
I don't recall there being an issue with it.
With anything dying? Yeah, I'm not aware of that either.
Okay. So, Mr. Carlo, have you guys had any issue with Building A so far as far as landscaping goes?
More up to Mike.
Any issues you had around? It sounds like you're trying to match.
Yes.
For obvious reasons.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Carollo, principal with Ben St. Luke's, and Mr. Chris Gustard of Blue Green Landscape Architecture, who has taken on this project from what's called Building B. And our goal was to mirror Building A and Building B in its landscape architecture, obviously, and infrastructure. Because I think one of the nicest things, and I've always told Chris this, is come back 15 years later, you see everything maturing up, and it all works. So Chris has been able to do that. Certainly, no reservations on my part. And Caleb, and I thank you so much, more than you know, for taking my unannounced calls. But I guess we got a little bit of gray area because the guidelines had some candidates of lists of let's call it native plants and hectares. I can barely pronounce the common name, let alone the botanical name. But the goal was to mirror it, complement it, and have both buildings kind of grow together. And eventually, with a bigger project coming, hopefully in the pipeline in 2026 here, we can kind of see how this thing goes. But with the project of Building B, it's just, on paper as we see today, and we just questioned if we can use some of the common plants.
Yeah, so if I can jump in, there's on Building A when it was completed, there are a number of species that were approved and planted that are not on the list. And so I've on the plant schedule I've noted that on note 2. So we're kind of stuck in a rock and hard place because we want to try and mirror some of the plantings in the new building, but can't because they're not in the guidelines. So maybe they weren't flagged before. I wasn't involved in the project, so.
So this isn't a sourcing issue,
No.
it's not a maintenance issue,
Mhm.
it's not an invasive species
No,
issue, it's
no.
not a pest control issue.
Aesthetic value and layering.
The other thing that I noticed, and this is my first project here in Hawaii, but the guidelines, the shrub selections don't offer smaller foreground plant material where you create a layering effect. So you have smaller, medium, larger, and it creates interest and character in any landscape. So it's kind of fundamental layering effect. So the proposed plants are all very small, mostly foreground plants. Either they're the color pictures that you guys have in front of you. Those are the ones that are the foreground plants that we would like to approve or like to use, in addition to the ones that were previously approved on Building A. And I can point those out to you if you, each one of those, if you'd like to look them up.
Yeah, I mean, I have a good idea what you got here. I do have one more question though, because I'm not a plant expert. However, I have tried to grow some of these things before. And I see that they're in the category, most of these shrubs, grasses, ferns, and perennials, which in my mind is sort of year round.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a hosta live in the winter. I haven't, but that doesn't mean anything necessarily. This could be something like that.
Well, they die back and they come back in the spring.
So there's no fill. It just sort of is gone, and then it comes back up out of the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, regular maintenance, in the fall, when you get a frost, you can come in and cut them back. Same thing with daylilies. Daylilies, a lot of those were used in Building A, so
Right.
there was liriope in Building A that was used. The only difference in Building B is that we're also using variegated liriope to create a different kind of coloring. So it's a different look.
So as the staff has been looking at through this, did you guys anything other than it's not on the list? Has anything jumped out at you like we have had problems with this plant in Isle Way before?
No, nothing, not that I'm aware of. It's pretty specific on page D1 of the SORC guidelines. It says all plants utilized on planting plans will be selected from the recommended plant list. And then it tells you to see those. And then when you go to those, if it's not on the list, it says under the note number 2, I'm sorry, any other native species not listed above will be allowed. So that's the main reason why we're in front of you.
And that was my gauntlet of questions. Do you guys have some questions?
I have a question. Why is not on the list? Why are they not on the list? I mean,
I can't speak to the person who put this list together, but if I did, I would offer foreground plant material that's smaller, because the majority of plants, shrubs on that list are all just, they get large. But yeah, I don't know why they're not on the list.
Mr. Williams, are you asking why the plants they selected are not?
No,
They didn't pull from the list?
these are not on the list, and I'm trying to figure out why they're not on the list. Do you approve them or not, and what you vote on?
Well, I think they reflect on the building A.
Right?
Those photos there of plants were used in building A, and we wanted to,
Some of them, yeah.
some of them pull them back to building B.
So they're trying to match buildings
Yeah.
with what's in place currently.
On some of those, yes.
So I guess my question was, if they're not on the list and they're gonna work, you're telling us, hey, that somebody decided that this is what you want, but it's not on the list. Is that what you're saying?
So I wasn't involved in the previous phase. There are a number of shrubs here that are not on the approved list that were approved and planted. So I guess it wasn't flagged or wasn't caught maybe, or
So I guess the way to look at this, are you guys having heartburn with using the existing list that Isle of Wight has?
Is it a cost factor?
no.
It's just the layering.
Layering and planting design is kind of a fundamental, principle, and so that's how I like to do planting designs, and I suspect that's why some of these smaller plants were used on building A, because they weren't on the list, and they were used there, so we just want to try and repeat that, and to have a cohesive look, for the project.
One other question. Are you saying that they were not on the list because whomever put them on the list, you basically used them, right? And so that question would have to go to whomever decided to use them, right?
Let me provide a little context here. The guidelines for the St. Luke's Historic District were adopted in 2014. I believe they sprang out of this committee and they went to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, and that's where they were adopted, and they've been enforced ever since. Maybe Amy can provide some insight onto what the thought process was behind these particular planting selections and the guidelines. But otherwise, the ordinance allows you all to make an exception in cases where you feel that it is appropriate. If there needs to be a discussion about what is on the list as a standard, that can be a separate discussion by this committee outside of their request at this time.
But correct me if I'm wrong, the guidelines were just that, they were guidelines. They were not exhaustive of every plant species that could possibly go in the ground in Isle of Wight County. I don't think that's what we ever intended to do when it was up here before as a St. Luke's guideline.
Yeah,
It's not mandatory.
I think there was an aesthetic. I think there was an aesthetic
Correct.
that was trying to be achieved through the planting schedule. But the guidelines are attached to the ordinance section under the historic overlay district. So for the St. Luke's one in particular, folks who come in here with development in the St. Luke's district are to follow these guidelines. And if they choose not to, that is where you all come in to make the decision about whether or not that's appropriate.
Amy, you want to add a little more? Sure.
So not to kick the can, but I wasn't here when the guidelines were adopted as part of the regulations either while I was over in economic development. However, that being said, I think it was just maybe at the time because everybody agreed with the aesthetic that was being recommended in the design guidelines for St. Luke's, they just went ahead and wholesale adopted them. as the
Yes.
regulations.
I think you're right.
It may or may not have been the intent that those were the only plants you could use. However, the effect of it being now in the regulations where it says, you shall use these plants, please see the list, we're kind of limited from staff and administratively having a lot of flexibility there. So that's kind of why we felt like you all could maybe provide some discretionary ability.
I think Mr. Scott and I were there going through that, and that was a developer-driven application, certainly, for package and et cetera, and working with staff.
You're talking about for the development behind St. Luke's?
Yeah, for the whole St. That St. Luke's, yeah. Okay, that helps me bring things back to focus. I remember us going through that. There's a lot of pieces of that. Yeah, landscaping was one of them, certainly.
If I could offer one more.
Sure.
So the guidelines do offer the ability to use native species. So, I mean, conceivably, landscape architect could come in and, do all native species. And the majority of the shrub selections on here are not native, just to be clear, though on the approved guidelines. So I just wanted to point that out.
You don't have any issue sourcing these? It's
No.
not like you're.
No, these are very common, yeah, and it's not a money thing, but, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Wouldn't it be easier for them to just follow the guidelines? They're saying money's not an issue, just go ahead and bring it into the
Are you
regulations.
asking them or me?
Yeah.
So, the reason for the plants that were selected is because the guidelines don't provide for small foreground plant material to be able to layer, planting design. So it's gonna be a nicer project with these in there. I mean, and honestly, if they came out, it would be not as great of a planting design. Our opinion, sorry, yeah.
I'm just trying to understand why you wouldn't just follow the regulations and be done with it.
Well, I think you guys were trying to match. I think that's what I'm understanding. We're trying to match building A.
Is my understanding what he's saying is that under the guidelines, most all of the plants that are on the guideline are going higher. And what he's trying to do to make,
That's correct.
have a layering to match the other building to staff. And unless we have a problem with these specific plants he's recommending, it's gonna make a better looking project because it'll be uniform. Also, it will be some layering other than just flat shrubbery.
Or just one row of shrubs along the building, and that's really,
It's gonna be tight.
yeah.
So building A is like grandfathered, you don't have to worry about that?
I don't know if that's the term that we use.
So when they, when they came through with building A and they had the windows and the awnings
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
pergolas approved, the landscaping was shown on those plans. And then the plan reviewer at the time took those approved conceptual drawings and kind of applied them to the site plan at the time, which is how I believe those plans were approved.
So building A is not approved, really?
Yeah, it is approved. It was approved that the
Based on
landscaping
these
plan was
guidelines.
part of the exception that you provided them when they did their pergola and windows. The landscaping was part of those conceptual drawings.
It was not flagged as a big issue at the time.
We approved it as
Now-
the.
And so you're saying building A is not an issue, even though it's not in?
They can't go back and do anything to building A. I mean, they can, but they'd have to go through the guideline again. They could change out the plants that they have, but that's not, that we're not really, the only reason we're talking about building A is because it's what is already planted. And they're asking us relatively match it.
Okay.
Another question we could ask Vinnie is the plants that do match, so you're just not meeting the minimum required landscaping points. This would be above and beyond what is normally required.
And I think there's a point system that was, that we certainly obliged to, and I think we exceeded the points. But really, the whole goal was to get some of that building A into building B, plus what Mr. Chris has designed as it to be.
So they look cohesive.
I think when we approved it, we were looking at the design of it of the landscaping design.
Right.
Not looking at what plants are gonna be making up the design. Is that?
Well,
Well, there are species on here that you guys approved that were not on the list,
Right.
that are out there planted that
We
we wanted.
didn't look at the different species of what was in play. We looked at what the overall design of the landscaping conception.
There were also, there was an actual planting plan with quantities and everything,
So I
so.
think our focus was really on the doors and the
Yeah.
windows.
That's right, that's right.
When was this list developed?
2014, it was adopted by the Board of
The list
Supervisors.
was already in existence then.
It's part of the guidelines.
Guidelines.
Yes, it was part of the guidelines when they came before y'all in 2021
Okay.
for building A and everything.
and
So it fell through the cracks.
Well, it hasn't been given the thoroughness that building B has been given. Is a different way to sort of look at it. So now they're here, staff's brought it before us, so it's up to us. We can have, to tell them how we want them to proceed.
if I may, Building A, when we did and it was Mr. Keith Oliver, our landscape artist, since has retired. But Building A does have the inventory in its landscaping out there of the plants that are on the guidelines as well. It's just there were some that weren't. And it's not like we totally vacated the guidelines in Building A. It was just a nice design, and I think, as Mr. Scott, I would like to echo what he said. You look at it as a whole, just like I do, as this really looks good and this can work. But a lot of the species were still within the guidelines at Building A. Building B, we're kind of saying the same thing. Mr. Chris is certainly putting in the shrubs, trees.
This is gonna be a beautiful project. I mean, it's gonna exceed the guidelines, in my opinion.
So I have a staff question. Just make sure, and so everybody else can hear it. I think I know the answer already. If we decide to approve this application as it's come in front of us, does not change the fact that the guidelines are the guidelines. So the next application that comes before us, we have an individual opportunity per project to decide whether we want to offer.
Correct. If we had another application for landscaping in the historic district and it met all the guidelines, you all would not even have a meeting. We would approve that administratively. You all only have the meeting if it doesn't meet the guidelines.
Right. But the approval of their alternative plans does not alter the guidelines at all. It does
Correct.
not mean it sort of, okay, it opens a window for the next person to come along and
Correct.
necessarily use these plans too.
Correct. Altering any guidelines, whether they be landscaping or otherwise, would be a
We'll
totally
make sure
separate
everybody's-
conversation.
Here, it's clear about that.
Then set precedents, we have.
No.
Correct.
follow
No, it
that
does not.
same
Mhm.
path.
Correct.
The only thing I'll note, I appreciate the comment about the thoroughness of the package, but it wasn't as thorough as it needed to be. Vinny sent some pictures of the existing building to me, and I failed to include them in the package here. But we could bring a Google and do a street view of the property if we need to.
I definitely know what it looks like.
Okay.
So, does anybody else up here have any questions for these two?
This may not be relative, but once these plantings are established, they're new plantings, who maintains them, or are they?
Our company does.
Your company does.
In St. Louis, and specifically, it'd be Mr. Jason Edwards, who takes care of all the properties. And
I
he
know
does
a
take
lot
care
of
of
these spreads, it's a plant that I have, and it tends to get much bigger, and so I don't know if that's at all a problem,
That's what you mean.
or,
I mean, over the years, it has to be dug up and divided.
yes,
Yeah.
that's
So,
not.
that's every 3 to 5 years, possibly. And it can grow in and become just one full quarter, and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay,
And staff, Wilch has a
Any
component of that.
Yes, any non-residential uses are required to post a landscaping surety bond of 25% of the total cost of the product and labor. And so we go ahead and do an initial inspection, make sure everything's planted correctly per the plan, and then 2 years later, we go out and make sure that nothing has died, and that the property owner is willing to replace those items. And once they do, we do another inspection and release the bond back to the property owner. There is a county
It's
policy.
not gonna die.
I know, that's why
It's good stuff, you know, as far as it's very durable.
it's a workhorse of landscapes, planting. And if I just add one last thing, for you guys to consider, so there's really only a handful, like four or five of these small shrubs that are not in the guidelines that we're asking. This is not a wholesale change of species. Like for example, on the trees, the Christmas jewel holly is in the guidelines. However, it is it's just a cultivar. It's a better cultivar than the festive, which is in the guidelines. Magnolia Jane is just it's another cultivar of Magnolia solangiana, which is in the guidelines, and the guidelines allow for different cultivars of species. And the blue zinger carex is considered native, and so the sheet that has the highlighted species in yellow, there's really only four or five total that are not on the guidelines, or that weren't used on the previous building A.
And I'll just note, to Chris's point, there was more yellow on this sheet upon my original review. Chris was gracious enough to take a look at my initial analysis, and we made some revisions. So there was less yellow on the sheet that's in front of y'all. But I took your comments that you did, and I tried to be specific in my research, and really, to be honest with you, using AI and Google to try and find this information out from a person who's not a plant expert, and that was my determination that these were not considered native. But again, that is staff's prerogative to do our research, and the applicant's prerogative to make the argument that he's making. And you all have to make the decision.
And we're not here arguing, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That means some lawyer lingo here.
We're just trying to compliment what we did at building A and pull it together.
I have one other question because I'm new. Is this one company applying to do this, or we will be receiving the same type of information from whomever, and then we make the final decision on who's gonna do it? Is that the way this works?
Any application that comes before you all is property specific and project specific. So if he comes back in front of you all with, say he submits for further development on any other part of the property, he would have to be in conformance with those guidelines, and if he's not, we would have another meeting and he'd be back before you.
Well, I guess what is the scope of the work when somebody we found and say, okay, this is it, we're gonna do it?
So the scope of the work is determined by the site plan that they submit to planning and zoning. Once we review that site plan and put our approval stamp on there, we put in the zoning permit, which allows them to do the work,
Okay.
that the work they're allowed to do is contingent on the approved site plan that goes through our office. So any deviation from that, they would have to either come back and amend that, or they'd have to keep what's in the approved site plan. They can't just deviate from their plan if they wanted to. They'd have to come back to us to
Well,
take a
I
look
guess
at it.
my question there is once we determine, at some point, we determine that what you're doing, we agree, right?
Mhm.
And when we do that, they're not competing with anybody else, I assume, because we agree, am I right or wrong?
If you all approve the request in front of you all, then the application then bounces back to staff, where we have to do a final review of everything. We have to make sure that they've made the right application for the zoning permit. But staff will make sure that what they're planning is what you all approve.
Okay.
That's our job to sort of carry out y'all's decision, make sure that's done.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion? Do we have any motions?
If we have no other questions or discussion on this matter, I recommend we approve the application as presented.
All right, everybody hear that?
I didn't hear.
There's a motion to approve the application as presented.
I'll second
All in favor?
Aye.
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 No?
No?
4, yes, 1 no.
Very good. All right.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only other note I would make under announcements is, I think I told, somebody this, I think I told Durward on the phone, to mark your calendar for December the 3rd, if you could. We have received another park application here in the courthouse district, and any development in the courthouse district has come before you all. So I'll be working on that over the next few weeks, expecting a package from you in the mail, hopefully, if it gets to you.
Maybe this one will come.
Yes, if it gets to you. And so, anticipate another meeting at this point on December the 3rd, 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.